Welcome to another edition of Inside Carolina's Game Plan podcast. Greg Barnes will join us in a minute. I'm Tommy Ashley. That's Jason Staples, responsible by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Jason, Wake Forest comes to town Saturday night, 8 o'clock at Kenan Stadium. And North Carolina and Wake Forest have played some crazy football games over the last 4 or 5 years. What is it that makes Wake Forest such a difficult matchup for Carolina? Obviously, Sam Hartman no longer there, and some of those receivers are gone, but it always has seemed like it's just one of those type games for Carolina.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that it has been Wake Forest has had some quality quarterback play for some years, and they've been a team that's built up until recently. They've been a team that's built pretty heavily through recruiting guys that they could develop in-house and then be veteran teams. So you're playing teams that have a lot of third, fourth, and fifth year guys playing. They also, for a while, they did a great job of evaluating and recruiting top-tier receiver talent. They had some beasts out wide. 6'4", 6'5" guys that could run and were tough to cover. And then you pair that with an offensive system that's different from anything else you see all year, and it just becomes a headache. So, those factors, not all of those factors are in place quite as much anymore. I think the transfer portal has kind of hurt them, and, they've not had the same level of quarterback play that they had back when Hartman was there over the last couple of years. Bachmeier's been fine this year, but he's not been quite at that level. So, there's been a lot of shift there, but I think it's still a game that you're gonna have to pay attention to.
What's interesting about Wake Forest, and I said this, and I want to get your take on it. It's one of the downsides, I think, to the portal deal. It's good for kids, it's good for whatever, but teams like Wake Forest get hammered on the outgoing lane, and they don't have much coming on the end. And I think that's maybe the disappointing part of it for me. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but Wake Forest has no chance in this climate. What do you think?
Institutionally, yeah, they're in a bad way. Now, that can change a little bit depending on how. So, there's some interesting things here because Wake Forest has a lot of money, right? They've got a small. It's a very small school. It's I believe the smallest enrollment in Power 5. If it's not the smallest enrollment what used to be the Power 5, now Power 3 or whatever. I believe it used to be the smallest. So they don't have a large alumni base, but the alumni base they have is very well to do. And there's a lot of money at that school. So it's not inconceivable that they could decide, a few people could decide to go all Phil Knight on this and decide to, be more competitive. They're equipped to do some of that. But at the end of the day, they're just never going to have the deep pockets of say an Ohio State with, 60,000 undergraduates at that institution who then go and graduate. And then some of those people go and become, millionaires and beyond with lots of expendable cash to spend on players. Or Oregon, where you've got Uncle Phil, he's basically given them a blank check for the foreseeable future because he wants to see them win a national title before he dies. So, you're not going to compete with that, but they could, in theory, if they committed, collect some of the money that they have available in that alumni base and do all right. But honestly, I don't see that level of passion in their fan base and in their alumni base to be able to do that. And without that, they've got no shot. And, I don't see that their administration has ever really been interested in playing that level of big time college sports. They've always been happy to be in the ACC and to have college sports, but they've never been one of those programs where you look and you go, okay, well that they want to play with the big boys. That's never been Wake Forest. And in this climate, that means you're not gonna be competitive.
Greg, and of course, folks listening, we're not talking about Saturday night's game. We're talking about holistically, just talking about how Wake Forest has really suffered at the hands of the transfer portal. And Jason mentioned in there that they've got money. Whether or not they spend it is another thing. I guess you could say the same thing about Carolina, perhaps. But your take on the portal and how it sort of shifted, excitement or whatever away from teams like Wake Forest and heck, really Carolina as well.
Yeah, I don't know that it necessarily shifts excitement away. I think it hurts teams that had a plan in place. And one thing that Dave Clawson talked about a lot was they weren't recruiting to sign 4 stars out of high school, even though, of course, they were. They were signing kids they thought could project to 4-star talents in their 4th and 5th year in the program. And I think Tony Bennett's a great example at Virginia. He had a number of guys that he brought in who maybe were raw or maybe had not physically matured to the point where they could help early. But what he did so well is he redshirted a number of guys. And other guys didn't play much their first couple of years. But then as they learned his style of play, learned what he wanted to do, and were older and more mature and experienced and all those things, well, now they could be successful. And that was Tony Bennett's plan. And that's Dave Clawson's plan. And now with the portal the way that it is, you can't do it anymore. You cannot sit and wait on guys to develop in your program, because if they end up being something within your program and nobody knows about it and they're not seeing the playing time they want, they're going to get into the portal.
Or even if they are seeing the playing time that they want. Look at Sam Hartman. Look at,
Sure.
the probably 3 or 4 of the best 5 players that they've had in the last 5 years did not finish their careers at Wake Forest. And that's brutal. I mean, those guys ended up finishing at major programs. I'm trying to remember the running back that they had that is now doing well in the NFL.
Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, Kenneth Walker, who went and he went to Michigan State. And I mean, Michigan, it's not like Michigan State is exactly, the cream of the crop, the most well-heeled, throwing the most NIL money out there either. I mean, when you're losing your best players to Michigan State, that's kind of a sign of where you are in the pecking order on this. And like you said, with that flexibility of players to leave, it's just really easy for a place like Wake Forest to turn into a farm system for, the bigger programs.
Especially when you have a good coach like Clawson, who does a pretty good job of developing talent. The other part of it too, and I think this is an interesting conversation, probably more for an off-season talk. But the conversation devolves into this idea of, Wake really doesn't just want it as bad. Maybe you can make that argument. But they do a good job raising funds for the athletic department. It's one of those things where, if you commit a ton of money to NIL, is that always like the smart thing to do, the right thing to do? And that's a whole different conversation. And the reason I say that, SMU is kind of looking at what they've done NIL, because everybody knows that when they signed the deal with ACC, they're not getting a full distribution from the conference for first couple years. And so they had a fundraiser to prepare the program to get through the initial stage and be able to thrive at the P4 level. In 1 year, and this is Texas oil money for you, in 1 year, they had 4 gifts of $10 or more million, and they had 35 gifts of at least $1 million in 1 year. That's crazy money.
That's why they were willing to come into the ACC and say, "Don't worry, we don't need the TV money. We'll just come. Just invite us to the party, and we'll be fine. We don't need to worry about TV money's nothing. Like
Exactly.
$30 million, $35 million a year. Well, that's pocket change. We'll take care of that. That's never been our problem. The problem has just been, since we got the death penalty, we need a place where we can play at the big boys table. But once we have that, we got a lot of people who are willing to pay a lot of money. So,
And now here they are about to play in the ACC championship game.
Yeah, not right now. They're my favorite to win the conference. I mean, I think of the contenders, I think they've been the best all year.
Yep.
It's crazy. That is the difference in college football now when you got Wake and SMU type situations. Let's turn a little bit to the game. Carolina, of course, looking for bowl eligibility at 8 o'clock on the ACC Network Saturday night in Kenan. Greg, I'll bounce back to you to start this off. I do find it interesting that Carolina has struggled at home. Mac has said as much, and we've seen the results at home. Wake Forest has been road warriors all season. Now, granted, they haven't played a lot of people, but neither has Carolina. Just your overall thoughts on this matchup here. Before you got in with Jason and I, we're just talking about how crazy these games have been over the last few years, with the most normal football game being the one in 19, I guess, when Carter stepped out of bounds there at the very end. But just this matchup has always been pretty intriguing between Wake Forest and North Carolina.
It is. I think Wake Forest is a good example, and it kind of goes into what Jason was just saying there about the current state of college athletics and how that relates to Wake. You can scheme an offense pretty well, as long as you got a good quarterback and you've got decent talent at the skill positions. It's much harder to scheme a good defense if you don't have the players. And Wake has been able to do that. Clawson's done a good job of that in recent years. Carolina, of course, has not had good defenses. And so you get into these, 58-55 a couple years ago, where Carolina's down by 21. It's like, yeah, it's not a problem.
It's like a Virginia basketball game. Actually, the higher scoring a Virginia basketball game.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of what Wake is this year. They were really a dumpster fire last year, but this year, the quarterback positions settled down a bit. They've got some decent options at the skill position. It's not an elite offense by any stretch, but it's above average. Defensively, they're a mess, and we can get into that. But they've done what they've needed to do against lesser opponents to get to the record that they have. Carolina, we can say they've largely done the same, except not taking advantage of the JMU games, kind of the thorn in their side, and it will be for the remainder of the year. But I do think it's interesting. Both these teams are 2-3, and if Carolina can win on Saturday, that will improve them to 3-3. Which moves them up into a tie for 7th place in the ACC standings. And what were they in the preseason poll? Number 8. So we're
seventh is pretty good around here. 7th is pretty good around here.
Yeah, it was a round the way journey to kind of get to where we thought they would be. How about that?
It is. This is the upside down compared to the last few years. Jason, let's talk about this Wake Forest offense and North Carolina's defense. I mentioned the home and away thing. I think it coincides more with Kamen Rucker not playing healthy at home versus playing healthy on the road. But Carolina's defense versus the Wake offense. You mentioned Bachmeier earlier, and a lot of people think, hey, he's not very good. He's been sacked almost 30 times, blah, blah, blah. He can run a little bit, and he can throw it a little bit. Just sort of set us off here on the D versus Wake O.
Yeah, this is actually where the real concerns lie. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are here, Greg, but I mean, I think Carolina's going to have to score some points in this game to win it. I mean, obviously, like if you take that full literally, yes, you need to score points to win it. But Carolina's going to have to score because I think Wake Forest offensively is not Wake Forest offense is not a great matchup for Carolina's defense, because of some of the really frustrating stuff that they do. And we've seen this for years. The slow mesh thing, they still do it. It's not been as slow this year as they've done it in the past, but the play is still there. I mean, they're still running what's effectively a duo type look up front, where essentially the whole idea that they have with how they're doing it in their offensive structure is they're going to use their 5 offensive linemen to block your bigs on the defensive line, and they'll typically double team both of your defensive tackles, and then essentially what they'll try to do is get a little bit of movement there and then the back is just kind of playing cat and mouse a little bit with the backers. Wherever the backer fills, he's going to try to go elsewhere. So you see him, he's just going to try to be real patient, and just let stuff in front of him just kind of move vertically a little bit because you're getting those double teams. And because of that, it's hard to get penetration against them on the interior. It's hard to create a lot of negative plays against them because of how they kind of handle that. And when you've got a team like Carolina that's not been super strong on the interior this season, that's not great, right? And this is where they've given Carolina fits in the past, is being able to do that. And if they're able to run on first down doing that, that's a problem. And then they RPO off of that. So they'll read that. And if you start bringing safeties or backers hard, then they'll RPO it behind you. And that the slow mesh, what makes the slow mesh for them is they'll ride that mesh in, almost to the line of scrimmage while the quarterback is actually watching a safety. So most teams, when they're RPOing your linebacker or your nickel or somebody on that second level. What Wake does with the slow mesh is that they're actually RPOing a third level player. So if that guy steps down to take the run, then they're throwing it over the top and they're throwing a vertical off of the RPO. And again, because they're double teaming those defensive tackles, they're not getting guys upfield. They're not really trying as much to get to the backers and all of this. They're trying to push the defensive tackles into the backers and then let the back kind of find his space. So this is going to be a game where Carolina is going to have to hold up on the inside, on the interior. Their backers are going to have to play great. And that's all then combined with, Bachmeier's been pretty efficient. You mentioned, Greg, also that they've been decent on offense. And I think stylistically, they present some real challenges for Carolina. To me, the place where Carolina can win this, and the thing that if I'm coordinating against this offense, I'm trying to let my ends be the guys that get penetration. So I'm basically telling my defensive tackles, bury it, just try to get low and don't let them push you too much, but you're not going to make many plays in this game. But I'm turning my ends loose and I'm getting them on the interior a lot. I'm letting them take that B gap a lot, the gap between the tackle and the guard. And I'm trying to let them shoot in there to cause problems and get penetration. Because I think Rucker, I think Evans, I think Atkinson, I think those guys, and Cowan as well when he's on the field, I think those guys could potentially be the difference there in getting some penetration against the run that could help change this game. And I'm pinching a lot with those guys, trying to take away that inside run, and I'm trying to stretch it and then let my backers chase. That would be how I would do a lot of it in this game, to try to take away the things that they're doing best, because they're going to try to run it right up the gut and do a lot of what Duke did to have some success. And I think they're better offensively than Duke.
One thing, Greg, that looking at the numbers and having watched Wake Forest, and this is a guy that's been there forever, is Taylor Morin, and he's in the slot. And he's going to be matched up most likely against Caleb Cost, and we've seen Caleb Cost get picked on substantially this year. He's gotten a little
one
better.
Guy can't beat you, right?
Wake
receiver.
Campanero, what year was that?
Campanero, that's right, yeah.
It was like 2016 or 2015, something like that.
I declared on this show that one guy could not beat North Carolina. He had like 47 receptions. And I'm going to find it while Greg's talking. But that matchup, for me, watching these two teams, Carolina's defense, that matchup worries me the most as somebody who wants to see Carolina's defense show up at home against Wake in Kenan Stadium, Greg.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that Morin, his primary spot is in the slot, but because they like Deuce Alexander in the slot as well, Morin's seen a lot of snaps on the outside. And so while he's not a big guy, he is quick. They have some quick options. And I agree with everything Jason said there. I think it's interesting. We're so far along in the season, we have a pretty good handle of why teams are kind of what they are. And that's exactly the case with Wake. One thing that I find interesting about Bachmeier is he's been really good. I mean, if you look at what his numbers are, PFF, I mean, he's got an 86 overall offensive grade, which is really good. And he's been solid when kept clean. He's got more big time throws and turnover worthy plays, although not a ton. Adjusted completion percentage is right at 73%, 14 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. And although they don't do a lot of deep passing, he's been really good. I mean, he's got a 93.3 grade there. 19 of 48, 6 touchdowns, 3 picks, 13 big time throws deep down the field. Where he's really struggled, and this speaks to kind of what Wake has done offensively this year, is in those kind of medium passing lanes. So that the 10 to 19 yard throws, typically those are going to be the throws over top of the linebacker, short of the safety. Those are difficult throws, and that's one area where he's really struggled. He's actually, his numbers there, he's 46 completion percentage, 1 touchdown, 5 picks, 0 big-time throws, 5 turnover-worthy plays. And when you look at what Wake has done as a team, really what set them back offensively is the lack of explosive plays outside of some of those deep throws. When you look at their long scrimmage plays, Wake is solid enough to kind of middle of the pack in the ACC on plays of 10-plus yards with 137. But when you dial that back just a little bit and you get to plays of 20-plus yards, Wake's all the way at the bottom in 15th place at 36. And that's an issue. And I think one of the things that when you kind of watch this team, they really have to work their way down the field. And this may surprise some people, but they have more trips to the red zone than North Carolina. They have more trips to the red zone than SMU. I think they're tied with Louisville in terms of trips. So that's a good thing that they're getting there for the Demon Deacons. But at the same time, they're not having a lot of those long play touchdown scores where you don't have to worry about getting into the red zone. And that's kind of a key component. That's why I think it's important, as Jason says, if you can disrupt them, and we know all the stats about, if you get a sack, the likelihood of the offense scoring plummets. Tackle for loss, it doesn't drop as far down as a sack does, but it drops it down. Same as with a holding call, those kind of things. So be disruptive and know that you don't give them a gimme, make them work their way down the field. But if you can trip them up a little bit, they've shown an inability to make kind of the big plays on 3rd and 13 to kind of get out of the hole. And they're okay. I think they're completing 38% third down conversions, which is fine. It's not great. It's decent. But get them behind the change and make them really work because they just have a difficulty in those big-time plays, big explosive plays.
Jason, Damon Claiborne, you mentioned the mesh and the running back and all that. He's another guy that Carolina needs to take care of. Claiborne, of course, 824 yards, 91 yards, 91 and a half yards a game. Give me standouts for North Carolina. You mentioned Rucker, Evans, and Atkinson. Are those the 3 you expect to see highlighted when this one's over if Carolina has success, or is there somebody else maybe?
It's those 3 and Huzzy, because Huzzy's the guy that you're most likely to get a turnover from. So I think that's your group. And if it's a really good day for Carolina's defense, then you'll see a defensive tackle, maybe a Ritzy or somebody like that, or a Shaw that has managed to break those double teams a couple times and make a play, or has managed to do something in the pass rush game at some point and come free. But I think that's basically your group.
Garrett Chapman in the chat asks, and this is for both of y'all, over under sacks for Carolina on Saturday, 4? We'll say over under 4.
I think that's fair.
Push.
I think it's over, but I think that's a fair number.
That's a good number. I'm going to go push.
Push on that, Garrett. Appreciate the question. Appreciate the comment. Garrett is a regular. Anything left for Carolina's defense against Wake's offense? Obviously, Taylor Morin's an excellent punt returner. He's an all-around good player. We've mentioned him, and Claiborne as well, and Bachmeier. Anything left on the defensive side for Carolina that we need to talk about before I do the break? Yay, nay.
I don't think so.
Cayman Rucker game, I think. We'll see how that works out. Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com, sponsors of the show, sponsors of Inside Carolina, and great friends of you if you're a premium subscriber. Get your premium Top Hit Premium message board code and go to Johnny T-Shirt. Get 10% off. Get all the swag you need. East Franklin Street or online. Take care of them. National guys pay the bills. We'll come back. Game plan. All right. We're back. It's the game plan. That's Jason. That's Greg. I'm Tommy. It's Johnny T-Shirt. And this one's sponsored by Congruity. Offensively, this is the interesting thing. And Buck Sanders has talked about it, and we'll talk about it more. I asked Chip Lindsey about it. Wake Forest is vulnerable through the air, Jason. Should Carolina continue to feed Omarion Hampton repeatedly and just pound them that way rather than taking that bait through the air? I think there'll be a little bit of both, but where should the primary focus be for North Carolina?
Well, I don't think you have to choose here. So when you're looking at the defense, the positive things that I said about Wake Forest's offense kind of get you can't find as many positives on defense for them this year. Looking at defensive success rate. Either of you care to guess where Wake Forest is in the ACC in defensive success rate?
16.
I think last.
They are last. Stanford is 16th at 52% in success rate on defense. Wake Forest's defensive success rate is 47.2%. So they are in last place, and the separation between them and the second to last place is almost 5 percentage points. That's the same as the gap between number 16 and number 9. Okay? That's they've been bad on a down-to-down basis. And that's because you mentioned throwing the football. Teams have completed 70.1% of their passes against Wake Forest for 7.4 yards per attempt. That's healthy. Now what that means is that they're playing a lot over the top, right? They're not, that 7.4 is not a huge number. That means they're not giving up a bunch of big plays, but they're giving anything up underneath that you could want. And then you have the other factor. The reason I say you don't have to choose is they're giving up 4.4 yards per carry. So it's not like they're real stingy on defense or on the run defense either. So I think you just come into this, you run Omarion Hampton, and you're going to get plays. And the other thing is it's not only that they're giving up 4.4 yards per carry, but in 10-plus yard rushes given up on the season, they're the third worst in the conference. They've given up 51. But in comparison, North Carolina's given up 35 rushes over 10 yards on the season. So that's the gap. That gives you an illustration of where they've been on that. Florida State, by the way, is the worst in the conference in giving up 10-plus yard rushes at 65, which is a really, really large number. And that is how a defensive coordinator gets fired, by the way. You give up 65. Mid-season. Yeah, you give up 65 rushes of 10-plus yards in 10 games, and you're probably not going to be coaching in the same place the next year. But they're in 15th at 51. In contrast, by the way, what a good defense looks like, SMU has given up 18 rushes over 10 yards on the season. 18.
Wow. And do we consider SMU a great defense?
Well, they're really good. But Wake Forest, 51 of those. And Omarion Hampton has a habit of breaking out a lot of 10-plus yard runs. So to me, this is one of those, you can almost roll, you could come into this game. There's certain games where you look at the team and you're like, okay, we need to attack this. This is their weakness. This is how we need to do this. And we need to just keep hitting this one thing. This is more one of those games where you bring in one of those D&D dice like the multi-sided dice that or one of those or a pair of them that has about 12 or 15 sides, and then when it comes time to call a play, you can just roll the die and go, all right, number 4, all right, that's give to Hampton on counter right, all right, that's what we're going to call, and you expect it to do well, and then you roll it and it's number 13, and you're like, okay, well that's RPO, with a go here on the outside. All right, and you feel like whatever you roll has a chance of winning, because this defense has not really been on a down-to-down basis. They've not been stable. The place that you do have some concern, and where this game, I think, ultimately gets determined, is they have managed to force some turnovers. They've got 9 picks on the year. They've forced 12 turnovers on the year. That's right around the middle of the conference. You go back to the Cal game. One of the reasons that game stayed a little closer is they managed to get a key pick when Cal was driving at one point. So you've got to manage the football as long as you take care of it on a down-to-down basis. If you manage the football at the quarterback position, and then you manage what you're doing in terms of handing the ball off, you should be able to march up and down the field against this team if you're patient.
Nick Anderson's still on that defense. He feels like he's been there forever. Greg, your take here on Carolina's approach. I think it's a Hampton day. They're all a Hampton day, but I think to Jason's point, Criswell can continue to get better.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Jason here. I don't know that it matters what North Carolina does. I mean, if you look at Wake's defense this year, the only teams they've really stopped have been bad offensive teams. They only gave up 40 to Ole Miss, but that game was over early, and Ole Miss just kind of coasted. And you can kind of say the same about Clemson, although that game was a little bit closer to start. The interesting thing with Wake defensively is I've watched a few of their games, and the Cal game, probably more than any of the other ones, was basically just an acknowledgement and acceptance by the defensive coordinator, and I guess by Carlson as well, that nothing else has worked. So we're just not going to let you beat us deep. And, if you work your way down the field, so be it. And we've talked about that before with Gene Chizik. And really, when your defense is not any good, you have 2 options. You can do that. You can make teams work their way down the field and try to beat you. The whole bend but don't break. Or you can say, you know what? They're going to score on us anyway. Let's get after them and try to create some havoc. Well, they went with the former option. And they're not getting after the quarterback. I mean, the Cal game was wild because Buck pointed it out. But if you just go back and watch the game, Cal's throwing the ball all over the place. And the reason why is they have wide receivers running free everywhere because Wake's just trying to play zone. And then a guy would catch it and they would tackle him, and that would be it. To kind of illustrate that point, and Jason did a little bit, but Wake, in terms of 30-plus yard plays allowed through the air, they've only given up 6 all year long. That's tied for 4th nationally. So they are not getting beat on catastrophic plays. That's the good news. The bad news is that they rank 133rd in pass plays of 10-plus yards. 115. 115. They've only played 9 games, which is crazy. And so when you look at passing defensive yardage against FBS competition, they're 133rd as well, giving up 317 passing yards per game. And as Jason pointed out, they have had some success with interceptions. They have 9, which is T30 nationally. Limit yourself in terms of turnovers. Take care of the ball. I think Criswell will have a field day. But that was the interesting thing about the Cal game. It's not like Wake was stacking the box or anything. They'd have 6 guys in the box, and Cal would have a tight end in, and Cal still deciding to throw the ball. So I think there's going to be options. Lindsey just needs to try not to get too cute and just capitalize on the options that are in front of him. Criswell is going to have all day to throw for the most part. So just march your way down the field, put Wake in a hole, and if you can do that, then you got to feel really good about Carolina's chances.
Yeah, I'll
Jason,
add
give
one
me a
more.
receiver. Okay, go
One
ahead.
more. Their havoc rate on the season. So this is the rate at which that you force a negative play for the offense. So that's a sack, a fumble, an interception, batted ball, those sorts of things. Havoc rate on the season. Number 17 in the ACC, so worst in the ACC again, at 12.2%. Next above that is Virginia at 13.6, Stanford at 14.7. So I mean, there's a gap between them and the teams above them even there as well. Top in the conference, by the way, is Duke at 19.7, and then Miami of Florida at 19.6. But they don't cause havoc. So you're gonna have time to throw. You're gonna have open receivers. They don't get a bunch of broken up passes. They have gone full in, like you said, Greg, on we're not going to give up anything cheap. We are just going to sit back here and let you play like you're playing 7-on-7 against air. And we're just going to hope that your quarterback just misreads one. Or that your quarterback throws one that goes through a wide receiver's hands, bounces off his face mask, and bounces up into the air, and our guy picks off. That's what they're counting on. That you just misfire, that you throw it to the wrong guy, that something bad happens. It's the old philosophy of, make them go 12 plays. And a college team, if you make him go 12 plays, is probably going to do something stupid somewhere in there. That's been their thing. So if you're Chip Lindsey in North Carolina, just don't do anything stupid. Don't put the ball on the ground. Don't throw to the wrong guy. And don't try to challenge them too much downfield. Just take what they're giving you and just keep taking your profit, march down the field, end every drive with a kick, and you probably win the football game. It's pretty straightforward.
What receiver for North Carolina is built to get to that 20 to 30 range, Jason, in a game like this?
Well, I think McCollum is one guy that you're looking at a bunch in this game because he's going to be a guy that's working that kind of underneath stuff. This is a team you can run a ton of mesh on and all of that. Some of those sorts of things where you're just, and when you do run mesh, you're going to end up sitting. You're going to end up they don't play a ton of man. I think Paysor is another guy that I think could have a really good outing on this. He's got a real feel for finding space, and he's been looking healthier. So I think those two would be two that I would sort of highlight on this. I mean, obviously Jones is going to be out there probably for the most snaps, but he's a little bit more of a vertical guy. They tend to use him a little bit more downfield. I think Paysor and McCollum would be the two that I would kind of highlight as most likely to get a little bit more attention in this one.
Yeah, Copenhagen as well as a tight end.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a game Nesbitt would go nuts in, I think, if he were healthy. Maybe Jake Johnson can get some run along with Copenhagen. Greg, Carolina's favored by double digits. What are those stats again?
Not good. Hey, but I'm trying to think exactly what the stat was, but if you remove the FCS games, Carolina had a stretch there where they were like 0-12-1 against the spread against FBS opponents going into Virginia. So now they've covered 2 games in a row. So on an upward trend, Tommy.
Yeah, I was looking at some numbers. Carolina's 3-5-1 against the spread this season. Wake is 2-5-2 against the spread. Of course, currently I hadn't looked at it, but it's like 11 or something like that. Let's check out and special teams. I think I mentioned more in returning punts. I think Carolina needs to be careful there. Don't give up a free one there, and also, McCollum has shown some ability there. Let me ask you a couple questions. That's
probably why Wake lost the game against Cal, because Cal drove down the field, kicked a field goal, and Wake fumbled the kickoff return, and Cal picked it up and scored, and they were up 10-zip. 3 minutes into the game, and Wake just could not kind of get back into it, even though it was close throughout.
Yeah, Gene Triplehorn in the chat wanted me to ask you that question, Greg. So I know you have the numbers. I've seen the tweets. I don't know. Are we on X anymore? Or are we abandoning an X? It seems like a lot of people are doing that. Anyway, Preston from Greensboro says, "I'm the Apostle Paul on the defense. I'm now a believer." Jason, are we a believer yet?
I'm Fox Mulder. I want to believe, but I'm still not quite there. There's not enough evidence to be entirely dissuasive, to get me away from belief. But Lord help my unbelief. I need a little bit more evidence, and this week is an opportunity for that. So, so we'll see. I'm still in the show me state.
All right.
Yeah. So look,
minutes.
let me say this: when you look at per possession scoring advantage (FEI), the games that everybody's happy about is Virginia and Florida State. Virginia ranks 86th nationally in that metric offensively. Florida State's 117th. So if you're basing your idea that the defense is it's the real deal now, it may be, but it's not because they're beating like elite offensive teams. Now, the good news for North Carolina is that there's really not any more really good offensive teams on their schedule. That's the benefit of playing a really weak schedule. But clearly this defense is playing better than we've seen it in recent years. So that's reason to celebrate in and of itself.
Why do I picture Greg Barnes walking around with a bucket of cold water? Just, he just carries a bucket. He's got like Popeye looking arms because he's carrying a 5-gallon bucket of cold water everywhere he goes. It's hilarious, man. But you're right. You're 100% right. And that's, if folks are watching this and have not been on the press coverage message board thread that we did from Tuesday night, it's worth checking out. It's prediction time, and that means that Greg and Jason are going to write their stuff down. I've already written mine down. It's Congruity. Matt at congruityhr.com. Email Matt, get your free assessment if you're an Inside Carolina person for your small to mid-sized business. It's time to take off for your small to mid-sized business, and Matt at congruityhr.com can help you with all the best customer service, the best technology, whatever you need from those guys. They're friends of Inside Carolina, so they'll be friends of you and your small business. Timmy Ann, like your Fox Motor reference there, Jason. To be honest, I'm not sure I know who it is. I may be showing my idiocy here, but
that was even after your time, right?
I'm old though. Is anything after my time? I mean, I'm not dead yet.
That was early 90s, right?
That look there, David Klein, Fox Mulder went over my head. I need to do a Google search. All right, let's get some picks in the chat. Oh yeah, I never watched that. That's weird stuff. Oh, there she is. She's tired. People are chatting too quick. There you go. Oh yeah, Lewis Bass.
That's a good problem. That just means we got a lot of people in chat. So hey,
Greg's got a fan, Lewis Bass. Greg keeps it real. As always, drop your predictions in the chat as we go through it. I will drop them on the screen. Jason, you're up first.
So ultimately for me, this is a game where I do think both teams are going to score some points, but ultimately I have more faith in Carolina's defense to be able to get stops against a Wake team that I do think they're going to move the football. I do think they're going to have some plays, but and there's going to be moments where those who have hair are going to want to pull it out because you're going to see 3rd and 4, and they're gonna do that dang slow mesh type thing with the that duo style blocking on the interior, and you're gonna see a guy just kind of dancing back there for a second and then take off, and there you go, 17 yards for, get it down inside the red zone. There's gonna be some of that, but ultimately, I think this is maybe the worst defense North Carolina and Omarion Hampton have played since maybe the first month of the season, certainly since getting into ACC play, and it might be the worst matchup that they've faced outside of FCS competition might be the worst matchup that they've faced for stopping Omarion Hampton. I think Wake's going to have, if Wake's going to stop Hampton, they're going to have to commit to stopping him in ways that they've not been willing to do all season, and that's to, take some risks. They've not been willing to do that. If they're going to continue to play sort of umbrella style defense, Carolina's going to rush for 7.5 yards a carry, or Hampton's going to rush for 150, and I think Carolina's going to avoid turning it over more than enough times to keep from turning it over enough times that Wake wins. So I'm going to go with North Carolina wins 38-31.
Dropped some in the chat as Greg gets ready to do his. David Klein's got 21-20 Carolina. Garrett Walker 45-10 Carolina. Tony Dowd 31-21 Carolina. Let me find a couple more. Garrett Chapman says they cover 38-24.
That's all that matters, right?
Yeah, really. I do not bet because I would have bet on LSU the other night, and that's why I don't bet. Brett Walden, a non-believer. Wake 34, UNC 24. And I saw another one of those in there. I'll find that. Anyway, Greg, what you got?
Yeah, so I think this is one of those games that's beneficial that North Carolina is playing it later in the year, just because Jacoby Criswell has his sea legs under him now. He seems to have a pretty good control of the offense. He's making better reads, and I think that's going to be a key component on Saturday, because there are going to be a lot of opportunities, and you just need to make the smart decision. And I think this is a game where there's going to be, even on the same play, you're going to have the smart decision could be like two different options, right? And that's going to be a good thing. But I think he's just progressed far enough along the season where this is a game that he should be able to pick the Deacons apart. And when you pair that with Omarion Hampton really kind of leading the show, I think it's just going to be too much for Wake Forest. I do think Wake will have some success scoring the ball, but I've got North Carolina winning this one. I don't know if you can see that. 41-27.
Wow. Greg's pulling the you're pulling with me what you do with Jason all the time. I think Carolina scores a lot of points. I think Wake Forest gets one late to make it a little bit more respectable. I think Carolina covers. I'll give mine in just a second. Randy, 34-21 Carolina. Mark Ellis, 28-20 Carolina. Blakely, 42-17. Preston, 35-20. Sean Crowley, probably the most regular person in these chats, 31-13. Garrett says Hampton goes nuts for 180.
Tommy,
speaking of regulars, where's Slagle been lately?
Oh, no, he gave up on us, I think. Slagle, if you're there, get back in here. 43-25. So 2 more points on each side than you, Greg.
Yep, that's good.
What you got? What'd you start to say?
I was just going to say, sorry to interrupt you. If you're looking for a comparison, Wake Forest has played 2 legitimate top 25 teams, and Clemson and Ole Miss. And I think Ole Miss is pretty good. They're probably a legit top 10 team. Ole Miss won 40-6 in Winston-Salem, and then Clemson won 49-14. So against legitimate top 25 level opponents, they have not been competitive. And I'm not saying that Carolina's back to a top 25 type team quite yet, but I think it will be a good gauge. If Carolina can come into Saturday night and just really control the game from the get-go and kind of have an easy fourth quarter, I think that bodes well about the continued direction and trajectory of this program and this team.
Indeed. My best that I can tell, that Campanera game was in 12. He had 13 catches.
We're getting old, boys.
I know. He had 13 catches for 164. And they won 28-27.
That was 2012.
That sounds right, yeah.
A.J. Blue was Carolina's leading rusher with 19 for 106. And Bryn Renner, of course, was quarterback. Tanner Price for Wake Forest threw for 327. against Carolina that day, and yeah,
That was 12 years ago.
yeah,
Guys.
time's flying, dude. We were doing, and we did a show on it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That was almost as bad as 12-0. All right, a couple more questions in the chat, or a couple more shout outs. Jason, you're old, man. Ken Murchison, this is cool. First college football game I ever went to was Wake Forest at Carolina, October of 54. Carolina won 14-7. Impressive, Ken. Very cool for sharing that. Mark Ellis, this is a question we'll do maybe in the off season or whatever, so you guys need to think about it. Will Power 4 break off and form a super league of 70 or so and just play each other and pay players and be a NFL B league for college prep? That can be a next level type thing, I think, Greg. David
I think
Klein,
that's where it's headed, though.
I think it's got to be, right? I mean, I think it's got to be going that way. David
Again,
Klein says
programs
Tyson
like
or
Wake
the other
Forest
guy?
don't want that.
Well, let me back that out. Let me back Klein's comment out. Can Wake Forest and teams like that stop that?
No, I'm just saying. I think what's going to happen is that those teams that don't want to be doing that sort of thing are going to drop down. They're just not interested in that. And there are other places like your Ohio States and Alabamas and the rest that's where they want that kind of product. They're much more interested in that, and I think you're going to see it. I think you will see a split where your Boston College, Wake Forest type programs are just not interested in going there, and then lots of other programs that are in the Power 3, Power 4 are, and I think you're going to have to see a split.
Yep.
I don't know if I like it. I don't. It's tough for me to get excited about pro sports because of the money. It might be that way for college sports. I don't know. It'll be interesting. Anybody watching the fight Friday night? I know you won't, Jason. Greg, do you have any interest in
Why
Mike
would you think
Tyson
I
and
wouldn't?
I don't know. I don't know. Do you have Netflix?
I have access to Netflix.
Okay, so well, we won't go there because we don't want to get FCC'd or
yeah.
RCA'd. Arg. Mike Tyson or Jake Paul? I kind of want to.
I hope Tyson destroys him, but
My
I do
question
too.
is whether it's a legitimate fight.
correct. I
They
agree.
they say it counts. It is
Well,
sanctioned and it counts on the record.
There have been a lot of fights that have counted, that have been sanctioned fights where one guy has taken a dive. Let's be honest about the history of boxing here.
How big's the paycheck for Mike? And I know
20 to 40 million apiece.
Yeah,
No,
and
he's,
and is there any
like
incentive for winning?
I hope he beats the hell out of the guy. I don't know.
I mean, I do too. I mean, I grew up, in the Tyson and Tyson adjacent era. So I mean, it's I remember back in with the Lewis Tyson fight, we a few of us Florida State players got together and watched that. Got the pay-per-view for that, and all watched that. And I was the only guy there who thought Lewis would win, because I just thought the length and Tyson was a little bit sort of long in the tooth by that point. But I remember like those days, it was just amazing. Anytime Tyson was going to go into the ring, like, so it's that, and I find the other guy pretty annoying just in the very little I've seen of him. So I'd like to see a guy who's been a real professional take care of business. But 58 years old is pretty old, guys.
It is. I watched the Netflix thing. I kind of scrolled through it. It's interesting to watch. I mean, the dude's preparing for Tyson, but Tyson, man, that's going to be disappointing if he loses. You mentioned getting a pay-per-view, Greg. I'm going to date myself. I was in Granville Towers. You talking about pirating stuff. Granville Towers, Buster Douglas, Mike Tyson. We had it on in the, whatever they call it, the common room. I don't even think kids use that anymore. But
we used to have the boxes that you could take the cover off, and then they had like the little chip you put in.
Yep.
Right.
Everybody
had
got
those.
everything. And I just remember running up and down the hall screaming in Granville West, third floor Granville West, screaming that Buster Douglas had beaten Mike Tyson. I mean, that was 91. Yeah. Lewis Bass, you're old, but we're getting there too, buddy.
Maybe the single biggest upset in the history of sports. was Buster Douglas, Mike Tyson.
Japan, right?
Yeah, unbelievable.
That may well have been, but here's the thing for me on that fight is how long does it go? Because
they're shortening the rounds. The rounds are 2 minutes, instead of 3. I just want him to beat the hell out of that kid.
I mean, I'm 42 years old, and I'm just telling you the difference in terms of being able to go for 2 minutes. I mean, even shortening it to 2 minutes, the difference of being able to go for 2 minutes at 58 years old versus the last time he was out in the ring, which was that exhibition even where it was kind of a joke between him and
Roy Jones Jr.
Roy Jones Jr. That you could see those guys weren't moving real well after about the first 30 seconds of anything. I mean, yeah, it was an exhibition. He didn't prep for it the same way and all. The question is, can Jake Paul stay out of the danger zone for long enough,
right? Yep.
For long enough to avoid getting his butt knocked out, because everything I've seen of Tyson in his prep has been him, old school, getting inside, getting into range, and then cracking ribs and throwing combinations. And if he's able to close the distance, because there's a pretty big height difference and length difference. If he's able to close the distance, I think power's the last thing to go. George Foreman was boxing until he's dang near 60.
Yep.
Power's the last thing to go. If he's able to get inside, he'll knock him out. But the question is how well can Jake Paul dance? And the thing with Tyson is he used to be so good at closing off the ring, and basically forcing guys into a corner so that they couldn't dance around him. I'm not sure he's quick enough to do that now.
Tar Heel Paul, where were you watching that fight? We were on 3rd West. This is a small world. And as the others mentioned, it was during the dunk contest. I mean, I remember, I think it was whenever he fought Marvis Frazier, and folks are expecting the golf portion of the show. You're getting the boxing portion. We do it all here. He fought Marvis Frazier, and I did not go to the beach with my family. I think it was like 86 or 87. And I was like, no, I want to stay. It was like Wide World Sports on Saturday or whatever, and turnkey is Saturday to Saturday. So I didn't go. And that fight lasted like 25 seconds and cost me a day at the beach because he about knocked Marvis Frazier. And that's one of the greatest pictures in boxing. Go find the uppercut he hit Marvis Frazier with. That dude's jaw looks like it's completely detached from his head and being held on by skin. But anyway, I hope Tyson beats him.
That punch traveled about that far too.
Yeah, I mean the dude's jaw was like way over here. But so if you are watching the Netflix fight, make sure you have on the North Carolina basketball game as well. That starts at 8:00 tomorrow. We'll be doing a post game. I'll be with Rob Harrington. Don't ask me how I'm going to do both, but I will be watching that fight one way or another. And also stay tuned for Inside Carolina Live, 5 to 7 from the Bowls lot. Yeah, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. from the Bowls lot. So if you're in the Bowls lot, come see us. There'll be some swag there. Denard Searcy, Joey Powell, Evan Rogers, and myself will be down there. Hopefully it's a good tailgate in the Bowls lot. It's been a while. Still trying to get Jason Staples and Greg Barnes in the Bowls lot for one game, maybe the state game on November 30th. We shall see. It's always a pleasure, boys. Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity are holding up the fort, and we're just working beneath the canopy. Jason, Greg, appreciate it.
I'm going to make orphans of his children.